Welcome back. Today, we're really digging into the buzz around a specific novel, Virginia Evans is the Correspondent from 2025. We've got a whole stack of reviews, reader comments, and they all seem to point to this book doing something quite special, taking a big risk with its structure and, well, really pulling it off.
That's right. It's generated a lot of talk.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. The core of the story, how it's told, is through letters. It's an epistolary novel. So everything we learn is from letters, notes, maybe some emails, all sent or received by the main character, Sybil Van Antwerp, which means for you, the listener, we're basically piecing together a whole life, decades of it, just from these written bits.
And that's always a tricky thing to pull off in fiction. That epistolary style, it can feel really artificial, like the author's just jamming information into letters where it doesn't quite fit. It can feel stiff.
Right. Contrived sometimes.
Exactly. But the word from pretty much everyone who's read this is that Evans just nails it. Completely. She took that really challenging format and somehow spun it into a story people are calling engrossing, funny, profoundly moving, and thoughtful. That's quite the combo.
It really is.
So our mission today, as we dive into Sybil's world, is kind of looking at how that very act of writing, and maybe what isn't said in letters, lets Evans build suspense and show us this really complex inner life, maybe in a way a straightforward narrative couldn't.
Yeah, that's interesting. And Sybil Van Antwerp herself, she's clearly the heart of it all. The descriptions paint her, initially at least, in a fairly familiar way. She's a distinguished lawyer. She's a mother, a grandmother, divorced. And when the book opens, she's retired in Maryland. Used to be a court chief clerk. And this setup, it gives off what reviewers are calling a cozy feel at first. You start reading, and you picture her, pottering with her gardening club politics and elderly neighbors, kind of settling in for a quiet story about retirement.
Right, you think you know where it's going. But that's the clever part. That cozy feeling, it's almost a setup, because that shifts, and pretty quickly, into something much more like a captivating, suspenseful mystery.
Ah, okay. So it doesn't stay cozy for long.
Not at all. And what's interesting is how the structure, the letters, helps manage that shift in pace. A lot of sources mention it feels like a slow start or maybe a slow build. And that makes sense, right? Because the epistolary method, well, it gives you information in drips and drabs. Sybil's not telling her life story neatly from A to Z.
No, just what she puts in that day's mail.
Exactly. Which, it raises a question. Does that slow build risk losing readers before things really heat up?
That's a good point. What keeps people hooked if it starts slow and fragmented?
I think it's the promise, the underlying tension. You sense these different threads, the cozy neighborhood stuff, her past career, these hints of something darker. You trust they're going to connect. The delay itself becomes part of the suspense.
So the slow build isn't a flaw, it's kind of the point.
I think so. It seems intentional. It mirrors Sybil's own hesitation, maybe, to face her past directly. And readers say it pays off hugely, that all those scattered threads all come together in the end for a most satisfying conclusion.
Yeah.
So the structure, it reflects her own journey towards dealing with things.
And it sounds like there's a lot to deal with. The contrast between her quiet retirement and this inner turmoil is stark. Sources mention she carries an immense burden of grief, tragedy, guilt, all from some awful life-altering mistakes. So these letters aren't just Dear Diary. She's actively wrestling with her past through them.
Absolutely. That's the engine driving her writing. It's this deep internal struggle. She's striving for forgiveness and to forgive both sides of it. That quest, trying to make peace with her past and maybe help others now, that's the emotional core under every letter.
That sounds exhausting. Trying to manage, gardening club drama while also processing immense guilt. How does that mix come across in the letters? Who is she actually writing to?
Well, the range is pretty amazing, actually. And her writing style gets a lot of praise. People call it quirky, witty, contemplative, and insightful. You can sort of group her letters into maybe three main types, and the contrast between them is really what creates the texture of the novel.
Okay.
So first, you've got her current life connections. Her grown kids, her brother, her best friend she's known for like 60 years. Those letters cover the day-to-day stuff, family tensions, the usual complexities.
Right.
Then there are these other connections, intellectual, maybe romantic. She writes to some elderly suitors, which is interesting, but also to the dean at the University of Maryland and other authors. It shows she's still got this really active, curious mind.
Keeps things from feeling too insular.
Exactly. But then there are the letters that really drive the suspense, the ones reaching back into her past. She writes to a former client. Apparently she's apologizing for some terrible decision she once made years ago.
Wow. Okay.
And then There's this mysterious, threatening stranger from her past she's corresponding with. That's where the real unease comes in.
So she's juggling all these different versions of herself almost through these letters.
That's a great way to put it. It's like she's managing multiple realities at once. The ordinary life letters are almost a shield, maybe, while she's fighting these bigger battles in other correspondences. The fragments aren't just telling the story, they're part of her defense mechanism.
And through all this writing, over the course of the novel, she actually changes quite profoundly. The timeline tracks her from her early 70s into her mid-80s. It's not just adjusting to retirement. It's described as a real transformation.
Yes, and this is maybe one of the most powerful takeaways from the book, according to readers. Sybil starts out seeming quite, well, defensive, guilt-ridden, someone who's clearly suppressed a lot of emotion to keep up appearances. It really challenges that idea that people are just set in their ways after a certain age.
That we stop changing significantly.
Right. But by the end of her story arc, through this process of writing and confronting, she becomes someone different. The descriptions say she becomes honest, apologetic, happy, and much less weighed down by her history. It makes a strong case for the possibility of real deep change late in life.
And that aspect clearly resonates. We saw one review where someone said, "Watching Sybil's growth as a septuagenarian gives me hope for myself and others." It lifts the story, making it about more than just solving a mystery. It highlights that wisdom comes with age and experience, and maybe more importantly, that forgiveness and kindness become ever more important.
Beautifully put, agency doesn't just expire.
And to underline just how central this act of writing is for her, the sources give us this wonderful specific detail about her routine. Apparently, 3 or 4 mornings a week, she has this little ritual at her desk. She straightens her paper, lines up her pens, counts her stamps, looks at her list of who to write to.
Yes. That ritual is so telling. It shows writing isn't just casual for her. It's work. It's necessary, almost therapeutic, you could say. But the detail that really sticks out is the mention of a letter she's been writing for years now, still unsent.
Ah, the unsent letter.
That feels like the absolute core metaphor, doesn't it? The ultimate truth she's wrestling with. Maybe the forgiveness she needs most is the forgiveness she has to grant herself. And that's the hardest letter to finish, or to send. It suggests maybe the point of writing isn't always about the recipient, but about the process for the writer, getting it down on paper.
Which loops back to the structure. How do you keep tension high when the information is filtered through Sybil and often delayed, sometimes maybe forever, in that unsent letter?
Evan seems to do it through that deliberate pacing we talked about. The slow reveal, the hints, the sense that something is about to break through the surface. You feel the weight of what's unsaid.
And this complex inner life is why she's being compared to some heavy hitters in literature. Reviewers are calling her bold, sassy, having real pluckiness and independence.
Yeah, the comparisons are flying. People see parallels with characters like Olive Kitteridge or maybe Lillian Boxfish.
Interesting. Why those specific comparisons, do you think?
Well, it places the Correspondent in that tradition of novels about older women who are sharp, maybe a bit difficult, but navigating really complex moral landscapes, often with a degree of isolation. With Olive Kitteridge, I think it's that prickly exterior hiding a deep, ongoing, internal wrestling match with morality and past actions. Sybil, like Olive, isn't always easy to like, but you see her trying so hard, even if clumsily, to arrive at some kind of goodness or resolution. That gap between the surface and the depth is compelling.
And that internal struggle playing out in these fragmented letters is what actually pushes the plot forward. So the big developments like repairing a strained relationship with her daughter, discovering long-lost family connections, even exploring new romantic friendships, these are the results of all that letter writing, that internal work made external.
Exactly. The stakes become very real, very human. Which brings us back to that structure again. It seems the novel's triumph is how all those fragments, all those different letters to different people about different things, finally coalesce into this incredibly rich, coherent portrait of a life. It's a real feat of construction. Readers pointed out a similar structural success in another recommended novel, The Names by Florence Knapp. Both books seem to take the epistolary form beyond a gimmick.
Right, they make it essential to the story being told.
Precisely.
So wrapping this up, if you're out there looking for something that blends mystery with a really deep character dive, what's the final takeaway? The Correspondent sounds like it's being hailed as a real gem of a novel. One that takes the risks of the epistolary form and makes them pay off, delivering both suspense and genuine emotional depth, all centered on this unforgettable, complicated woman.
I think that sums it up well. It's fundamentally a story about resilience, isn't it? About the sheer weight of life we carry, but also about the enduring possibility of change. It suggests transformation is possible at any age, but only if we're willing to do the hard work to sit down, face the past, confront the grief, maybe even write it out word by painful word.
Hmm. And maybe building on that idea, if Sybil found her path to clarity and transformation, not necessarily by mailing every letter, but by the very act of writing, of getting those coherent, complex ideas down on paper, makes you wonder, doesn't it? What are the thoughts or emotions you might need to articulate just for yourself, even if that letter, like Sybil's, remains unsent? Maybe the act of writing is the first step toward the clarity or the forgiveness you're looking for, something to mull over until our next deep dive.